la meta del planeta.
Estamos de regreso en la meta del planeta y ahora les voy a presentar a ustedes a Terry Townshend. Él es secretario general de Globe Internacional, esta organización a nivel mundial que reúne a legisladores de diversos países. Terry, bienvenido. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
¿Cuáles son los retos, cuáles son los desafíos que enfrenta Globe Internacional y cómo podemos hacer para aplicar políticas que reviertan el cambio climático?
I think the biggest challenge that we have is that climate change is happening now. We've emitted a lot of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, and the science is telling us that we need urgent action. Urgent action to mitigate the risks associated with climate change. Because if climate change continues unmitigated, there will be serious disruptions to the climate, and this could cause severe impacts all over the world. So not just in Africa, not just in Latin America, but everywhere there will be serious impacts. So as an insurance policy, it makes sense to mitigate these risks by taking action to reduce emissions now, to try to minimise those impacts. And so the biggest challenge we have right now is to speed up, accelerate the efforts that are happening in the international community, because so far they are not enough to avoid dangerous climate change. So that's the biggest challenge, is to accelerate the action now.
Si el reto es acelerar las acciones, ¿cuál es la manera de hacerlas? ¿Bajo qué método lo vamos a hacer?
Well, the United Nations process is ongoing, and they are scheduled to agree a new international climate agreement in Paris in 2015. But one of the ways to help ensure that agreement is as ambitious as possible is for legislators to take action now to advance laws which create the political space for the leaders to go to Paris in 2015 and take more ambitious commitments. So legislators have a fundamental role now in helping to create the conditions that enable a deal to be reached in Paris in 2015. And of course, the legislator's role doesn't end there, because when there is an agreement, it needs to be ratified. So it needs to be, the legislators will have a role in ratifying the agreement in their parliaments, in their legislatures, and they also have a fundamental role in overseeing the implementation, so making sure that governments allocate the right budgets to fulfill the commitments that are in the legislation. So the role of legislators starts now. They don't need to wait for a new international agreement. They can take a lot of the action we need right now, and their role is critical up until the Paris negotiations in 2015 and beyond.
Recientemente, los responsables del Banco Mundial, del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo y de Naciones Unidas urgieron a los gobiernos a acelerar las medidas. ¿Estamos en la ruta correcta o encontramos obstáculos todavía para llevar a cabo las acciones que permitan mitigar el cambio climático?
There are many challenges for governments and for legislators trying to tackle this agenda. And the first one, of course, is that many businesses, many institutions make money from the current situation, the status quo. So when you try to change things, there is always resistance, because those that are doing very well under the current system will resist change, and the people that do well in the future under a new system, there aren't so many of them yet, because we haven't changed the system. So it's very hard to initiate that change, and so it requires a very deep, intelligent debate with all sectors of society, so that they can fully understand the risks associated with climate change, the risks of business as usual, so the risks if we don't take action, and also the costs, so the costs of the action. You know, this isn't going to be, it's not a free solution. There have to be resources put into it, and a decision has to be made based on the risks that exist under the current situation and the costs and opportunities of change. And that's something, it needs to be an informed debate involving all sectors of society. And if that can happen, then I think in most cases people will make the right decisions in terms of where their investments need to be, reducing emissions and also improving resilience, protecting the economy and people from the impacts of climate change.
El gran reto de los países emergentes o en vías de desarrollo cuestionan a los países altamente industrializados porque los recursos no se aplican, no fluyen. ¿Qué podemos hacer para que esto ocurra?
Well, I think there are a number of things I think that we can do to help. And I think the GLOBE process is actually a good example of that, where we bring legislators together to share experiences. And obviously many developed countries, rich countries, they may have started to make laws and policies on climate change before, so they have valuable experience to give to other countries. And this gives countries a head start. So if you're starting to think about legislation now to tackle climate change, it's much better to know what's worked in other countries, what hasn't worked. So it gives you don't have to worry about thinking about all that. Doing the analysis, you can learn very quickly what's worked and what hasn't, and then perhaps make your law even better than the laws that have gone previously, because you can build on the experience. And so I think that's a very valuable process that we have here to bring legislators together to encourage that sharing of knowledge, sharing of experience, and helping the countries that are now developing climate legislation to make it even better than the countries that have gone before. So I think that's fundamental. I think finance is also very important, as you mentioned, and there are international climate funds that can be accessed, the Global Environment Facility as well, the World Bank, the regional development banks all have finance dedicated to this area. And so it's important to understand the mechanisms for how to maximise access to these funds, and that's something that I think is very important too.
¿Qué hace Terry Townshend día a día como ciudadano en lo personal para cuidar el medio ambiente?
I'm glad you asked because I'm actually a passionate conservationist. So, and I live in Beijing in China, and a lot of my spare time I spend trying to help species from extinction. So in particular, I lead some projects in China to try to save some very endangered species from extinction. So we talk to the local authorities, the local government, we talk to the local people about how to manage the areas and the land in a way that is consistent with the survival of the species. So I do a lot of work on conservation in China myself in my spare time, and that's I feel very passionate about that, about protecting biodiversity.
Thank you very much to be with us at La Meta del Planeta.
It was a very great pleasure to meet you and to do this interview, so muchas gracias.
Amigos, muchas gracias por haber estado con nosotros aquí en La Meta del Planeta. Yo soy Patricia Guevara, les agradezco el favor de su atención. Les invito para que continúen con la programación de Green TV.
La meta del planeta.